The sky above the kingdom of Valoria was heavy with dark clouds, as if the heavens themselves knew what was about to unfold. In the capital, banners of deep crimson and gold fluttered against the stone walls of the grand palace. The streets were crowded with spectators and servants, all whispering nervously about the mating ceremony, a tradition that had lasted for centuries. Families of noble blood came with hope or fear in their hearts, for the ceremony was not just a matter of love, it was a matter of power. Lady Elara of House Ravenshade walked down the marble corridor of the palace, her steps echoing softly. She was dressed in a flowing gown of midnight blue, embroidered with silver threads that caught the flickering torchlight. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to steady them. Today, she would be claimed. And she did not want it. Her mind raced with thoughts of the prince who would be her mate in the eyes of the kingdom. Prince Darian, known for his strict rule and icy demeanor, had never hidden his disdain for her family. The idea of being bound to him made her stomach twist in fear. She had heard the whispered tales of women who resisted, some vanished. Others were cursed to live in shadowed halls, their hearts broken, their souls trapped by old magic. As she approached the grand hall where the ceremony was to be held, her pulse quickened. The room was vast, with ceilings that soared like the wings of a mighty dragon. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. Nobles filled the seats, their eyes glittering with curiosity, expectation, or judgment. Elara's father, a tall man with a stern face, walked beside her. "Remember your duty, Elara," he whispered sharply. "This is not about your feelings. The kingdom watches. Your family's honor depends on it." Elara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand, father," she said softly, though every fiber of her being rebelled against the idea of duty. She wanted freedom, freedom from fear, from obligation, from the chains of her family and their politics. The ceremony began. Trumpets blared, echoing through the hall like a call to destiny. One by one, the noble women were brought forward, their names called, their fates sealed. Elara's heart pounded in her chest. When her name was announced, the hall fell silent. All eyes turned toward her, and she felt the weight of 1,000 expectations pressing down. Prince Darian stepped forward, his dark cloak sweeping the floor, eyes cold and calculating. He extended a hand to her, and the audience murmured in anticipation. Elara's palms grew sweaty. She could not do this, not to herself, not to her heart. A sudden thought struck her, a desperate, reckless idea. She looked to the crowd, searching for any escape. And then she saw him, a young servant, standing quietly to the side, his posture straight, hands folded, eyes calm despite the tension around him. No one paid him much attention. He seemed harmless, invisible. Elara's heart made a wild leap. In a moment of sheer instinct, she stepped toward him, ignoring the gasps of the crowd. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her cheek to his chest. I just, she stammered, hoping her actions would be enough to make her invisible, to shield her from the prince's claim. The servant stiffened at first, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. Then, very slowly, he embraced her back, steady and solid. Elara felt a strange warmth and safety, as if his presence alone could protect her from the entire world. Whispers erupted in the hall. Who is she hugging? A servant? At the ceremony? Noble women gasped. Some covered their mouths, and eyes widened in shock. Elara's heart raced, both with relief and fear. Relief that she had escaped Prince Darian's immediate grasp, and fear of the consequences that surely awaited her for such defiance. But what she did not know, and would not realize for some time, was that the servant she had hugged was no ordinary man. He was not a lowly observer or a mere shadow among the nobility. He was King Kaelin, the Alpha King of Valoria, disguised to observe his people. The identity he concealed was more powerful and dangerous than she could imagine. He looked down at her, and for a moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. Curiosity? Amusement? Something deeper, quieter, yet stronger? He did not speak. Instead, he let the moment linger, holding her with a steady calm that made the world outside fade. The prince's hand remained outstretched, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Murmurs turned into whispers of outrage. Some nobles began to shout. But the king, disguised as a servant, did not release Elara. His composure was absolute. And in that moment, he commanded the room, without a word. Elara felt a strange shiver run down her spine. She did not understand why she felt so safe in the arms of a man she barely knew, yet the feeling was undeniable. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. The hall seemed to shrink around them, the eyes and whispers fading into a distant hum. Her father's voice cut through the haze, sharp with panic. "Elara! Step away! This is madness!" "I cannot," she whispered to herself, though she did not entirely understand why. Something in her soul told her that letting go now would be dangerous not physically, but in a way that was harder to define. The king, still in disguise, finally spoke low, controlled, almost a murmur. "You are safe. For now." Elara opened her eyes, startled. His words, simple yet commanding, carried a weight she could not ignore. She studied his face, noticing the sharp line of his jaw, the quiet strength in his posture, the intensity in his dark eyes. There was something almost supernatural about him, something that radiated authority and power despite the plain clothes he wore. The audience erupted into whispers again. Some noblewomen began to frown in confusion, others in disgust. Prince Darian's face turned a shade darker, veins visible in his neck. He clearly did not understand what had just happened, nor could he. Elara's mind spun with fear and confusion. She had wanted only to escape being claimed, but in doing so, she had thrown herself into the unknown. Yet, there was a part of her an instinct, a spark that recognized something in this man. He was no ordinary protector, no ordinary human. And though fear clawed at her chest, a strange thrill ran through her, mingled with awe. The moment stretched, heavy and electric. Then, without warning, the king released her. Stepping back, he did not bow, did not speak further. He simply melted into the shadows of the hall, leaving Elara trembling, alone, and painfully aware of the eyes that still watched her. Her father grabbed her arm, furious. "What have you done?" I don't know," she stammered. "I just wanted to escape." But the king had already vanished into the crowd. For now, the ceremony could continue, but Elara knew the balance of power had shifted. She had survived her first defiance. But the kingdom, the ceremony, and the mysterious man she had hugged, all were forces that would not let her go so easily. As she was escorted to a quiet side chamber, Elara's thoughts could not escape the memory of his eyes, the strength in his arms, and the certainty in his presence. The servant she had hugged was more than he seemed, and deep inside, she sensed that her life and her heart would never be the same again. And somewhere in the shadows, King Kaelin watched her, unreadable, measuring, waiting. A game had begun, and neither of them yet understood how entwined their fates would become. Hook. Cliffhanger. Elara thinks she has escaped her claim, but she has unknowingly drawn the attention of the Alpha King himself. Danger, desire, and destiny now circle around her, and her next choices could change the kingdom and her heart forever. The palace corridors were silent after the chaos of the ceremony. Torches flickered against the stone walls, casting moving shadows that made the hallways feel alive. Lady Elara walked quickly, her mind still racing from the events of the day. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the folds of her midnight blue gown. Every step reminded her of the eyes that had been on her, watching, judging, questioning. She did not know why she had done it, why she had hugged the servant in the first place. Part of her had acted out of desperation, another part out of instinct, an unexplainable need to find safety in the unknown. Yet she could not shake the memory of his steady arms, the calm warmth of his presence, and the strange authority in his dark eyes. Her father's voice broke her thoughts. "Elara, where are you going?" he demanded sharply. His face was pale, and his hands trembled with both fear and anger. "Do you know what you have done? The ceremony, your family's honor, everything, you have jeopardized it." I wanted to escape," Elara replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I could not face him. Not today. Not ever." Her father's jaw tightened. He wanted to scold her, to force her into compliance. But even he sensed there was more at play than simple rebellion. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You have courage. I will give you that. But courage alone cannot protect you here. You need allies, and you need to be careful." Elara nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts kept returning to the servant, the man who had held her when she had no other option. She did not even know his name. She did not know if he was truly human, or something more. And yet, in that fleeting embrace, she had felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. That night, as the palace settled into uneasy quiet, a soft knock echoed at her chamber door. Elara's heart leapt. Could it be him? She stepped cautiously toward the door, peering through the small slit. To her surprise, the servant was there, standing quietly, his posture composed, his expression unreadable. "Lady Elara," he said, his voice low but commanding, "you should not be alone tonight." Elara's fingers froze on the doorknob. She had expected him to disappear, to remain a mysterious figure of the ceremony. But here he was, offering protection. "Why? Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you, you are safe." "For now," he replied, his dark eyes holding her gaze. "But safety is only possible if you trust me, and trust is something that must be earned." Elara frowned, confusion and curiosity warring within her. Who are you really?" she asked, though a part of her feared the answer. The servant's lips pressed into a thin line. He did not lie, but he did not reveal everything. "Names and titles mean little. Tonight, it is enough that you know I am here to help." Something in his tone, the quiet certainty, made her want to believe him, even as caution gnawed at her. She nodded slowly. I will try to trust you." For the rest of the night, the palace seemed different to her. Shadows no longer felt entirely threatening. They seemed to bend toward the unseen presence of the servant. Elara could not sleep, but she felt protected. The world outside her chamber felt both closer and farther away. Full of danger and intrigue, she could only glimpse, but not yet fully understand. The next morning, the palace awoke to whispers. Noble families spoke in hushed tones about the defiance of Lady Elara, about the servant she had hugged during the ceremony. Some were scandalized. Others were intrigued. Her actions had drawn attention, not only to herself, but, unknowingly, to the man who had saved her. Elara moved through the palace with a careful step, avoiding the eyes of Prince Darien, who now looked upon her with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She could feel the tension in every corner. Nobles were plotting, servants were gossiping, and her father was silently worried. Yet she knew that the servant, the man who had saved her, was the only one she could rely on. That afternoon, she found herself summoned to the palace garden, a quiet place of stone paths and silver-leaved trees. The servant awaited her there, standing as though he had been expecting her. He did not bow or speak unnecessarily. He simply waited, a shadowed figure among the sunlight and leaves. "You should not have defied the ceremony," he said finally, his tone firm but not unkind. "Do you understand what that means?" Alara looked at him, the breeze moving strands of her dark hair across her face. "I do," she admitted. "But I could not. I could not be claimed by someone I do not love, someone who brings fear instead of trust." The servant studied her carefully. There was something in her voice, determination, defiance, yet also fear that intrigued him. "You are brave," he said, almost softly, "and foolish. But courage often appears foolish to those who lack it." Ilara felt a strange warmth at his words, even as her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. You are not just a servant, are you?" she asked cautiously. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the garden, where the stone paths twisted like veins through a patchwork of greenery. "Walk with me," he said. "There are things you must understand about this kingdom, about the ceremony, and about the forces at play that you cannot yet see." As they walked together, Ilara noticed how easily he moved through the garden, his presence commanding without a word. He spoke little, but every glance and gesture seemed measured, deliberate, almost regal. She could not explain why, but her heart beat faster with every step beside him. After some time, he stopped at the edge of a small fountain. Water sparkled under the dim sunlight, and Ilara found herself drawn to its reflection. He watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. "The ceremony is not just tradition," he began, his voice calm, almost hypnotic. "It is a test, a measure of loyalty, courage, and character. Those who defy it do so at great risk. And yet, defiance is not always weakness. It can be strength, if used wisely." Ilara looked at him, the words sinking deep into her mind. Then, "You are not here to punish me?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "No. I am here because someone must ensure that defiance does not lead to ruin. You have potential, Lady Ilara, though you may not see it yet. And there are forces in this palace, dark, ancient, and unforgiving, that will test you further." She shivered, both from fear and anticipation. "And you?" "Only if you allow me to," he replied. "Trust is earned, not demanded, and safety comes with choices. Choices you must make, not someone else." Ilara's mind swirled with uncertainty. She wanted to trust him, to believe that the servant she had hugged, this mysterious, commanding presence, was her ally. And yet, questions lingered. Who was he really? What power did he hold that made him so certain, so composed? Before she could voice her thoughts, a distant shout echoed through the palace. A servant ran past the garden gates, breathless and panicked. "Lady Ilara, the nobles, they are speaking of curses, of punishments for your defiance." Ilara's heart leapt into her throat. The warnings, the stories she had heard since childhood, all seemed to come alive in that moment. And yet, the man beside her remained calm, unshaken, as if he had foreseen the fear that would grip her. "You see," he said quietly, "the world does not forgive defiance easily, but neither does it recognize courage when it is quiet and true. You must learn to navigate both." 17. Ilara swallowed hard, the weight of her situation pressing down upon her. And yet, beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She had defied the ceremony, faced her fear, and found herself in the presence of a man whose strength and mystery both frightened and fascinated her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the garden, she realized that her life had changed in ways she could not yet understand. The servant who had held her was more than he appeared. And she could no longer turn back, not from the ceremony, not from the palace, and certainly not from the strange pull she felt toward him. Cliffhanger. Ilara believes she has survived her first defiance. But the shadows of the palace and the mystery of the servant promise that danger, intrigue, and destiny are far from over. Soon, she will discover that the man she hugged is far more than a servant, and her next choices may alter the fate of the kingdom itself. The following days in the palace passed like a delicate balance of tension and shadow. Lady Ilara moved carefully through the corridors, acutely aware of every whisper and glance. The nobles had not forgotten her defiance, nor had the servants, though most avoided mentioning it openly. The memory of the mating ceremony, of her reckless embrace, lingered in every corner, a spark that threatened both scandal and fascination. Yet, no one dared approach her with malice, while the servant, quiet, commanding, and strangely protective, remained near. He had not revealed his identity, nor had he demanded gratitude. Instead, he watched her from the edges, his dark eyes observant, calm, and unwavering. Ilara could not deny the strange pull she felt toward him. Every time their paths crossed, her heart quickened, and yet fear and doubt mingled with curiosity. Who was he, truly? Why had he allowed her defiance to go unpunished? And most unsettling of all, why did being near him feel so safe, yet so dangerous? One evening, the palace held a feast in honor of the ceremony's completion. Torches cast flickering light across gilded walls, and nobles gathered in elaborate attire. Laughter and conversation filled the grand hall. But beneath the surface, the tension simmered. Ilara's eyes scanned the crowd, alert for Prince Darion, who had remained conspicuously silent since the ceremony. The servant approached her quietly, unseen by others. He offered a subtle nod. "You should be cautious tonight," he murmured. "Not everyone will forgive your defiance." Ilara inclined her head slightly. "And you?" He paused, considering her question. "I will remain where I am needed. For now, that includes you." His voice was low, controlled, yet it carried an unspoken weight. Ilara's pulse quickened, and she found herself drawn into his calm presence. Throughout the evening, she observed him. Even in plain attire, he moved with a quiet authority. His eyes seemed to catch everything, noting threats, whispers, and subtle movements. Yet he never appeared overbearing. He was always present without demanding attention, a shadow that both comforted and unsettled her. As the feast progressed, Ilara felt a growing sense of curiosity and daring. She approached him under the guise of needing a moment away from the crowded hall. "Why do you not reveal yourself?" She asked softly, leaning closer so no one could hear. The servant's eyes flickered briefly, the faintest shadow of amusement crossing his face. "Names and titles are meaningless if they bring fear rather than understanding," he said. "The world is full of people who judge before they know. I prefer to observe, to learn, and to act when necessary." Ilara frowned, sensing there was more he was not saying. "Protection, guidance, decisions that must be made quietly," he replied. His gaze held hers, dark and intense, and Ilara felt the first true shiver of understanding. There was power in him more than she could comprehend, and it was deliberate, controlled, and dangerous. For the first time, she noticed the subtle details, the way his hands rested lightly on the railing of the hall, the calm precision in his movements, the quiet force in his posture. Something within her stirred, a mixture of admiration, fear, and fascination. She realized that the servant she had hugged during the ceremony was no ordinary man. Before she could dwell on her thoughts, a commotion broke near the far end of the hall. Nobles whispered urgently, some clutching their gowns, others pointing toward a group of courtiers arguing over the ceremony. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Even in the shadows, she understood that every action she had taken was now being scrutinized. The servant moved with swift precision, his presence suddenly commanding. He stepped into the center of the hall, and despite his modest attire, all eyes turned toward him. There was a pause, a hush of anticipation. Elara could see it now. He was not just a servant. There was authority in his stance, a quiet dominance that demanded attention without a single word. He spoke, low and steady. Peace must be maintained. Disputes can be addressed, but not here, not now. Let the ceremony's outcome remain unchallenged. The hall held its breath. Even Prince Darian, who had been quietly fuming, hesitated, his expression unreadable. The servant's command carried an invisible weight, an authority that silenced argument and curiosity alike. After the crowd dispersed, Elara and the servant found themselves walking through the palace gardens again, where the air was cooler and the shadows longer. She could no longer contain her questions. "Who are you?" she asked, almost pleading. The servant regarded her carefully, his expression serious. "I am one who carries responsibility beyond what you see. My identity is not something I reveal lightly, for knowing it changes how the world sees you and me." Elara's heart pounded. "So, you are not just a servant. You are something more." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, as though weighing the depth of her courage, her honesty, and her capacity to understand. "I am more than I appear. That is all you need to know for now. But you must understand this. The choices you make now will shape not only your life, but the fate of the kingdom." Her stomach tightened. Every instinct warned her that she had entered a dangerous game, yet she could not look away. There was something magnetic about him, a force that drew her closer even as it demanded caution. She wanted answers, but she feared them just as much. As they walked, the servant paused near an ancient fountain, its water reflecting the silver leaves of nearby trees. He gestured toward it. "There are forces in this palace old, powerful, and not always visible. Some are bound by tradition, others by magic. You have defied one of these forces already, and that is only the beginning." Elara listened, awed and anxious. "And what happens now?" "Now," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "you learn, you watch, you survive. The world of the palace is not just walls and corridors, it is a living, breathing thing, full of shadow and ambition. You must understand it, or it will consume you." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. For the first time, she realized that her defiance at the ceremony had not only drawn attention, it had marked her in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. A sudden movement caught her eye, a shadow flitting between the trees, too swift to be natural. She shivered. What was that? What? The servant's eyes narrowed slightly. There are those who watch. Some are curious, some hostile. You must learn to see them before they act. Elara felt a strange thrill, the mix of fear and fascination that had followed her since the ceremony returning with intensity. She realized she was no longer just a noblewoman trying to escape her fate. She was a participant in something far larger, a game of power, shadow, and subtle magic. Why? Why did you help me? She asked, unable to contain her question any longer. The servant looked at her quietly, and for a moment, the air seemed to still around them. Because you acted from courage, not fear. Because you are more than appearances. And because I saw in you something necessary, something the kingdom needs, even if you do not yet understand it. Elara's heart thumped. There was meaning in his words, but also a warning. She sensed that the servant, this enigmatic, commanding man, was not just a protector. He was a force unto himself, and her life was now inextricably tied to his presence. The evening deepened, shadows growing longer, and the first stars appeared in the sky. Elara knew that the palace was no longer merely a place of tradition and etiquette. It was a world of secrets, power, and hidden dangers. And at the center of it all stood the man she had hugged at the ceremony, the one who had saved her from the fate she had feared. Cliffhanger. Elara has begun to understand that the servant is more than he appears, yet the full extent of his power and identity remains hidden. The palace is alive with secrets and danger, and her next choices will draw her even deeper into the web of shadow, intrigue, and the mysterious force that watches over her. The palace air had grown heavier with whispers and suspicion. Lady Elara moved carefully through the stone halls, every step measured, every glance cautious. Though the ceremony was over, her defiance had not been forgotten. Noble families, still shocked by her audacious act, watched her with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Every murmur seemed like a threat, every shadow like a predator waiting to strike. Yet, through it all, the servant, the one who had saved her, remained near. He was a quiet guardian in plain attire, moving through the palace with precision and authority that no one else seemed to notice. Elara could not stop thinking about him. Each time he appeared, calm and observant, her heart fluttered with a mix of fear and fascination. Something about him made her feel safe, yet she sensed that he carried secrets too deep for anyone to guess. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the high towers of the palace, casting long, silver shadows, Elara found herself summoned to the council chamber. Her father's stern gaze met hers. "Elara, you have stirred more than gossip. The nobles are restless. Prince Darian himself is agitated. You must tread carefully. Your actions have consequences beyond your understanding." "I understand, father," she said, though doubt lingered in her chest. "But I cannot obey without conscience. I cannot bind myself to someone I do not trust." Her father's lips pressed into a thin line. "Trust is a luxury few can afford in Valoria. Remember that." As she left the chamber, her thoughts immediately returned to the servant. She had begun to rely on his presence, though she still knew little about him. The memory of his calm strength, the warmth of his arms during the ceremony, and the intensity of his dark eyes haunted her. She wondered why he had chosen to help her. Who was he, really? Later that night, the palace gardens offered a quiet refuge. The moonlight painted silver patterns across the marble paths, and the gentle sound of water from a fountain created a serene backdrop. Elara walked alone, yet she sensed she was not unobserved. "You move well in shadows," a familiar voice said, low and steady. Elara turned, startled, and found the servant standing a few feet away. He had appeared silently, as if he had been waiting for her all along. His eyes, dark and intense, studied her with that same unreadable expression she had come to both fear and admire. "Why do you follow me?" she asked softly. "Am I not safe in my chambers?" "You are not truly safe anywhere in this palace," he replied. "There are those who would see you punished, cursed, or worse, simply because of what you did at the ceremony. I am here because someone must ensure your survival." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. "And why do you care?" He stepped closer, the moonlight revealing the sharp lines of his face. "Because courage deserves recognition, and recklessness deserves guidance. You acted from defiance. Yes, but defiance is not always foolish. I saw in you something necessary, something the kingdom needs, even if you do not yet understand it." Her heart beat faster. She wanted to believe him, to trust the man who had saved her, but doubt lingered like a shadow. "You are not just a servant," she said. "You cannot be. There is power in you, something more than anyone else here." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully, his gaze unwavering. "You will understand in time. For now, you must learn to see the palace as it truly is. Every noble, every servant, every shadow, there is more to each than meets the eye. And some of these forces are dangerous beyond imagination." Elara felt both fear and excitement. She had entered a world she barely understood, a world of power, secrecy, and subtle magic. And the servant, This enigmatic, commanding figure was at the center of it all. Days passed, and with each, the palace's political tension grew. Rumors of Elara's defiance spread among the nobles, reaching the ears of those who sought power. Some saw her as a threat, others as a curiosity, and a few whispered about curses and dark omens. The walls seemed to close around her, and she felt the first true weight of isolation. Through it all, the servant remained a steady presence. He observed quietly, offered guidance only when necessary, and never revealed the full extent of his knowledge or power. Yet his actions spoke louder than words. He protected her, intervened subtly in dangerous situations, and seemed to anticipate threats before they could reach her. One evening, a message arrived, a sealed note, delivered by a trembling servant. Elara opened it cautiously, and her eyes widened as she read. The words were clear. "You are being watched. Not all who smile upon you are allies. Trust cautiously." Her pulse quickened. She looked around, half expecting someone to appear from the shadows. But the garden remained still, bathed in silver moonlight. And then she noticed him, the servant, standing just beyond the fountain, calm, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You warned me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you know who sent this?" He shook his head. "I do not yet. But this is only the beginning. The palace is a web of ambition, deceit, and hidden power. You have already stepped into it, willingly or not. Now you must learn to move within it, or it will consume you." Elara's mind raced. She had thought she was escaping danger by hugging him at the ceremony. Yet now, she realized she had entered a deeper, more treacherous game. Fear mingled with excitement, and she felt the first stirrings of something she could not name. A mixture of admiration, trust, and something more personal, more intimate, for the man who had saved her. The servant stepped closer, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, electric. "You must understand," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "that the choices you make now will affect not only yourself, but everyone in this kingdom. And not all consequences can be reversed." Elara swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wanted to run, to hide, yet she could not. Her heart and mind both told her that she could not turn back. Not from the palace, not from the ceremony, and certainly not from the presence of the man who had become her anchor in this storm. Suddenly, the night air was broken by a shout, a servant running from the palace gates, his face pale with fear. "Lady Elara, trouble. Nobles are plotting. They speak of curses and punishment for your defiance." Elara's heart raced. The warnings she had heard all her life seemed to come alive in that moment. And yet, beside her, the servant remained calm, almost unshaken, as if he had foreseen the fear that would grip her. "You see," he said quietly, "the world does not forgive defiance easily, but neither does it recognize courage when it is quiet and true. You must learn to navigate both." Elara nodded slowly. The weight of her situation pressed down upon her, but beneath the fear, a spark of determination flared. She had survived the mating ceremony, defied expectations, and faced dangers she barely understood. She had also discovered the presence of a man whose strength and mystery were unlike anything she had known. As the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the gardens, Elara knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely a noblewoman seeking freedom. She was a participant in a game of power, secrets, and subtle magic, one she could not yet fully understand. And at the center of it all stood the servant she had hugged at the ceremony, the one who had saved her from a fate she could not bear. Cliffhanger. Elara has begun to understand that the servant is more than he appears. Yet the full extent of his power and identity remains hidden. Political intrigue and hidden dangers in the palace are growing, and soon she will face threats that will test her courage, wit, and trust in the man who watches over her. The palace was quieter than usual, the usual hum of whispers and gossip replaced by tense anticipation. Lady Alara moved through the marble corridors with cautious steps, her mind alive with questions, doubts, and the unshakable memory of the servant who had saved her. The man who had defied the ceremony, who had protected her from judgment and danger, remained an enigma. She had begun to trust him, yet the full truth of who he was lingered just beyond her reach. The mating ceremony was over, yet its consequences remained. Noble families were restless, plotting subtle revenge or seeking leverage. Prince Darian's disdain had only grown, his icy gaze following her in every hallway. Alara felt the weight of expectation pressing down upon her, but beneath the fear, determination burned. She would not be a pawn in the games of others. Not now. Not ever. That evening, she found herself drawn to the palace gardens once more. The silver light of the moon cast dancing shadows across the stone paths, and the fountain whispered softly in the background. She felt a presence before she saw him, and then he appeared, quiet as a shadow, yet impossible to ignore. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, carrying the same quiet authority she had come to rely on. "I have no choice," Alara replied softly. "The palace is filled with eyes, and I must understand them. I cannot hide forever." He regarded her with a mixture of concern and something deeper she could not name. "You have courage, but courage alone will not protect you. You must understand the forces at play. There are secrets in this palace, old and powerful, that few dare to challenge." Ilara's heart quickened. Then, for a moment, he was silent, his gaze steady, and then he spoke, words that made the air around them seem charged. "I am not what you think. I am no servant. I am King Kaelin, Alpha of this kingdom. I observed in disguise to see the truth of hearts, not titles, and your heart, your defiance, drew me in." Ilara's eyes widened. The man she had hugged at the ceremony, the one she had come to trust and rely upon, was the ruler of Valoria himself. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her, yet she felt no fear. Instead, a strange clarity washed over her. You are the king?" she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, and I have been watching you, not as a ruler watches a subject, but as one who seeks truth. You have courage, honesty, and a heart unafraid to challenge the world. Traits rare in this palace, traits necessary for the kingdom's survival." Ilara's chest tightened, a mixture of awe and uncertainty flooding her. She had defied the ceremony, escaped being claimed, and now stood in the presence of the Alpha King himself. Yet she realized something profound. She had not run away to hide. She had acted from instinct, from courage, and that instinct had brought her to him. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Not because I am noble, not because of my family, but because of who I am?" "Yes," Kaelin replied, his dark eyes holding hers. "And I see in you the strength to face what comes next. But understand this. The palace is a web of ambition and power. Some will seek to control you, others to destroy you. You must be ready." Ilara nodded, determination hardening in her chest. "Then I will not hide. I will face it, whatever comes." Kaelin stepped closer, his presence commanding yet gentle. "And I will stand beside you, if you allow it. But trust must be mutual. You must choose whether to rely on me, not because I demand it, but because your heart understands it." She looked at him, the moonlight catching the intensity in his eyes. For the first time, she understood the depth of his power, not just the authority he carried, but the wisdom, restraint, and quiet strength that defined him. And she felt something stirring within her, a connection that went beyond fear, beyond admiration. Something tender, powerful, and undeniable. Before she could respond, a sudden commotion erupted near the palace gates. Figures cloaked in shadow moved swiftly, whispers of conspiracy and hidden intentions rippling through the night. Ilara's pulse quickened. She had known that her defiance at the ceremony had drawn attention, but now the danger was immediate, tangible. Kaelin's expression hardened. "Stay close," he commanded, and with a fluid motion, he moved toward the source of the disturbance. Ilara followed, heart pounding, feeling both fear and a strange exhilaration. The intruders were agents of a rival noble house, seeking to challenge her position, perhaps even to capture or curse her for defiance. They underestimated the palace's defenses, and they underestimated Kaelin. With swift, precise movements, he confronted them, his presence radiating authority and power. Ilara watched in awe as he handled the threat not with brutality, but with controlled force, ensuring no unnecessary harm. When the danger passed, Kaelin turned to her, calm yet commanding. "This is only the beginning. There are forces that will test your courage, your resolve, and your heart. You have proven yourself brave, but bravery alone will not be enough." Ilara's chest heaved, fear and excitement mingling. "Then, I will face them," she said firmly. "With you, if you allow it." Kaelin's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, a rare softness that seemed to illuminate the shadows around them. Then we faced them together. The following days were a whirlwind of whispers, strategy, and subtle maneuvers. Ilara learned to navigate the palace with new awareness, understanding the webs of power, the hidden alliances, and the silent threats that lurked behind every smile. Kaelin remained at her side, guiding her with quiet wisdom, his presence a constant reassurance. Through it all, a bond grew between them, not sudden, not hurried, but steady, like a river carving its path through stone. They began to understand each other's thoughts without words, to anticipate needs, fears, and hopes. Ilara realized that her heart had shifted, quietly and irrevocably, toward the man who had once seemed a simple servant. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens under the moon's silver light, Kaelin stopped and faced her. "Ilara," he said softly, "you have chosen courage, honesty, and defiance when needed. But there is one choice left, one that will define not only your heart, but your destiny." Her breath caught. "What choice?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To trust fully, without fear," he said. "To embrace what has grown between us, and to stand with me not as subject or servant, but as partner, equal in courage, will, and heart." Ilara's heart raced. She looked at him, at the intensity, the strength, and the quiet vulnerability he revealed in that moment. She understood, finally, that her defiance, her courage, and her choices had led her to this point, and she knew that her heart had already made its choice. I trust you," she whispered, stepping closer. "I choose to stand with you." Kaelin's eyes softened, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. He reached out, taking her hand gently, a silent promise in that touch. "Then we face everything together," he said, his voice a low, steady reassurance. The palace, with all its shadows, whispers, and dangers, no longer seemed overwhelming. Together, they had faced defiance, intrigue, and the unknown. Together, they would face whatever came next. In that moment, under the silver light of the moon, Lady Ilara and King Kaelin, once servant and noblewoman, now partners in courage and destiny, stood side by side. The kingdom might challenge them, shadows might rise, and threats might come from every corner. But they had discovered something stronger than fear, stronger than politics, stronger than the ancient traditions of Valoria. They had discovered trust, they had discovered courage, and, above all, they had discovered each other. Final cliffhanger, resolution. The palace and kingdom remained filled with intrigue and danger. But Ilara and Kaelin now faced the future together, their bond forged through courage, defiance, and trust. The story concludes with the promise of shared destiny, partnership, and the power of choosing love and loyalty in a world of shadowed ambitions.